All right, let's learn how to use auto smear frames, this animation smear frame tool that I made. If you open up this file directly, this is what you'll find. It's basically a bunch of different collections that show, just like examples of how you can use it and things like that. We have this, this one is multiples for creating like multiple parts of objects that are moving fast, things like that. So what we should talk about first is that this is made with Blender version 4.4, as you can see in the bottom right hand corner. I didn't test it in previous versions, so I recommend 4.4 or above. Another thing is if you want to use this in other files, there are, I guess, two ways of doing that. You can test things in this file directly, but if you want to use it in other files, you can go to File and then Append. Let's just like go into a different file so I can show you. We go into a new file right here. You can go to File, Append, and then you want to find the blend file that you downloaded. So I know where mine is. Mine is right here. It's smearframe_2. You double click it, go to node tree, and then the one that you want is called smearframe tool, and it has an underscore. So it should be at the top of the list if it's, by name, and that's the one you want to append. So I'll just append it. And now if we bring in some object to apply it to, we should be able to go to the modifier panel. We can add a geometry node setup, and under there we have our smear frame tool. So now it is applied. To see it in action, you need something to be animated. I'll just show you how to put it in your asset folder right now. Go to Edit, Preferences, then down in file paths, this is where you have the asset library option. So I have mine just pointing to a folder. If you don't have this set up, you can like make a new folder anywhere on your computer, and then you just press the plus button, and then you want to select that folder and add asset library right there. Then it will appear. You can see the path right there. So you click the folder if you want to change the path. Then basically anything that's marked as an asset that's in that folder will appear in your asset library. And then, to open your asset library, you can make a new like window over here and just change this to asset browser. You can set this to all libraries, so it'll show all the folders right here. I know that mine is in products and it's unassigned, and so it's a smear frame tool right here. So if I want, I could actually just like delete the existing one on here. So now this monkey head, it doesn't have anything. It doesn't have any modifiers. We can just drag and drop this on there and it will appear. So this is probably like the best way I would say to do it, because then you can access it from any file without having to append it each time, but you can do whichever way you want. So to make this start smearing, you need to animate it first. I recommend animating this without this applied, or you don't want it visible at least. So I'm just going to press this button so that it isn't viewed in the viewport. You can animate this however you want with it's just an object mode or with a rig. I'm just going to press auto key right there, and it's going to insert keys automatically. And I'm just going to like move this around a little bit here and there. Doesn't really matter. I'm just doing this as an example, and then I'll bring it back to the center. So this is what we have, something like that. Okay, so now that I'm done with the animation, we can turn it back on. The reason I say to turn it off is depending on how heavy the mesh is, this could sort of cause it to crash. The way that the smear frames are sort of calculated is that when it's on a frame, it's going to try to capture the position of all of the points, and it's going to do that for each frame, and it discards old ones after, I forget, like 3 frames or something. If you're trying to animate it while it's doing that, it kind of has a hard time gathering the data. It makes sense to animate it without this applied anyway, and you'll get a more accurate view of how it is going to smear afterward. Okay, so I turn it back on, and now it is smearing, but you can see it's sort of jumping around in a weird way. So that is because if you go to the timeline right here under playback, I have this set to sync to audio, which means sometimes it skips frames so that it can play like in real time at like 30 frames per second or 24 frames or whatever we have it set to. I have it set to 30 frames per second right now, but we can just set this to play every frame, and this should work a little better. See, and now it's not jittery and it is smearing. Okay. You can also see that we have this line down here. That means that it's caching. So sometimes if you try to update something in the settings over here, it might not look like it's updating. And if that is the case, then it's possible that it's because it's already cached. You can delete the cache by going to this physics option over here. And then under simulation nodes, you can delete the cache like that. And it will basically reset it back to normal. You can also just turn it off so it doesn't cache. It's not trying to save any parts of the simulation, and it'll just calculate it every time you play it. So we can restart it now, and it's smearing again. All right, to check out some of the other options, let's just go back to the example file, which is smear frame 2. This is the one that you will download most likely. Okay, so I do already have one called object smear, and this is the same sort of idea as the Suzanne head, except we have some like rotation and stuff too. Let's check out some of these options that we have in here. So all of these, I'm just going to start with smear first. So smear mode. We also have an option to use a collection, which if you hover over it, we have some tooltips. It says replace the selected object with a collection. So instead of using this this sphere, we could use a collection, and then we can just point it to one of these collections we have here. So I already have one that's just called collection, and it's this guy animated in here. And this is actually like a few separate objects. We have the guy's body, we have the sword. I think the eyes are separate, the eyebrows and the hat. So using a collection is basically just a good way of making it so that you don't have to apply that modifier to every single object individually. You can apply it to the whole collection. So let's go back over here, and we can just select that collection. It's just called collection. And now, even though it's not visible, we can still see it in here, and it's going to blur everything in there. We can look at the textures, and the textures are working fine. This is what it looks like. All right, let's just uncheck this, and we have our sphere back. So let's just go down the list right here. Some stuff is simulated and some stuff is sort of happening after the fact. So like the factor is after the simulation, which means you can see it update in real time. This is the thing that you would want to animate if you want to sort of turn it on and off in the middle of an animation so that only some parts are smearing. We also have this vertex group right here, which means you can select it. You can select a vertex group. So for instance, if we come over here and add a new vertex group, it's just called group, and I can weight paint a part and say like I want, wait a sec, let me turn. Okay, yeah, it's just because I had this visible, so it was kind of obscuring it. But yeah, we can just like select a part, and now only this part that we weight paint will have smears. So let's go back to object mode. Let's select the group right there, and now and turn the factor back up. Oh, we also have to turn this back on. Okay, so now only that part that I weight painted is actually going to have a smear. We can just delete this too, and you can see it comes back to, being a full smear. Another thing is if you go forward one frame at a time, it should work, but when you go backwards, it doesn't really work. It's like it pretty much the calculation only works correctly when it's going forward. So that's just like one of the limitations, I guess. But yeah, so that's the vertex group. Then we have, I'll talk about extra long smears after. We have smear strength. We have texture strength, which if you turn that down, then it will be smooth. Smear strength is basically just how long the smear is. I would say 1 or 0.5 is probably the best. If you turn it up higher than that, you might want to also smooth it out. Otherwise, you're going to get very like rigid, sort of stretched out faces like that. And this is actually this point right here is the previous frame, and this one is the one before that. So it starts actually just showing the previous frames kind of. But yeah, usually I set this to 1. That's usually fine, but it depends on how fast it's moving. Then you have smear smoothing, which is going to just smooth out that part. This is also going to depend a lot on the mesh you use. Now, these next two options only work when you have extra long smears, which is just going to simulate it differently so that you can get more than just the previous 2 frames. You can get, I don't know, it'll just kind of keep adding frames to each other depending on how long you have it set. But we can turn the resolve speed, which is basically just how fast, how do I explain it? It's like how fast the smear goes away. So if you have it set to 0, it's not going to resolve very fast, and as you turn it up, it will disappear faster. The smear length, basically the higher you set it, the more of a smear you'll get. You can see it'll go really far and it'll linger in the air like that. If you turn the resolve speed up, then that tail scale should go away faster. So you really have to play with this, and it will act very differently on different models. So a better way to think of the extra long smears, I guess, is like if you have a person running, this is not a very realistic option, by the way, the extra long smears. I just really like how it looks because I think it's kind of silly, but let's check it out on this model right here. So right now I do already have extra long smears set up, but I have it set to something that makes it look pretty like tame. And if I pause it, you can see how it's smearing. So part of this is because of the speed threshold. Is basically saying it's only showing parts of the mesh that are moving faster than a certain speed. So if I turn this down, you can see more stuff starts to smear. But as I turn it up, let's get to this part right here. As I turn it up, it will get rid of objects that are, or parts of the mesh that are moving slower. So it's going to be like the feet are moving faster, so those are going to stretch more. Yeah, so you definitely have to play with the smear length and resolve speed to get it looking okay. Then we have, we have the texture strength. So this is really good for adding noise to it. So if you don't want it completely smooth, again, this is probably going to be better to show on this object right here. So as it's spinning around, we can play with the texture. By default, it's set to a noise texture. And then you have the options down here. You see, as you turn it up, all of these parts that were grayed out, you have access to them now. So yeah, turn it up as much as you like. You can change the scale. If you want it to look smoother, that's just a smaller scale, and the detail, things like that. Randomness only works when you have it set to Voronoi, and then it'll basically give you sort of like a texture or like a checkered sort of pattern right here. And if you want it to be consistent from like frame to frame, you can set a UV map and it will look at the UV map of the object. So I'll just name that UV map like that. And now the texture, unless you have the texture speed turned up, if we set it to 0, it won't change. The texture should stay the same shape the whole time. You can see like as it spins around, the shape should stay the same like that. It's not really moving. If you do turn the texture speed up, it will change a little over time, and that might be more apparent with the noise. Well, let's see. Okay, so that's the shape when there's no texture speed, but if we have it set to like 10 or something like that, now it should, let's see, it should change over time. Yeah, it is changing slightly over time. So that's the idea there. So yeah, not a whole lot of options. That kind of covers everything. Now we should move on to multiples. And this is the sort of thing that might make more sense. If you look at this animation right here, it's like, you know, focusing on the parts that are moving fast, which are the fists, and it's sort of like duplicating them. For a more clear example, we can just look at this, you know, circle again, at the sphere. Let's just set this to multiples, and then we basically only want to look at this panel. I'm going to scale this down so it's like easier to tell what's going on. Okay, so as it spins around, it's going to make trails of duplicates like this, and you have control over like how many frames back it goes. So this is transitioning between the current frame and the one before, and it's making 3 duplicates. So we have the original one and then 1, 2, 3 like that. So you can turn this up and put like a whole bunch in there. And then if you want more frames, it's going to put 9 multiples for like each frame, basically. Now this one doesn't arc as smoothly because it's just like you have this one, and it's going like linearly between them. So that's why I also added this noise option, so you can kind of like push them around to make them a little more irregular. And this, yeah, it makes it more irregular while it's moving. It's like harder to tell that it's like straight lines like that. But we also have the multiples distance, which is just going to change like how far away it gets. On something spinning around like this, it doesn't make as much sense. But if something's going in a straight line, so we can speed this up. Let's see, at, yeah, this part right here. So at this part right here, if we change the multiples distance so it sticks closer, then it's basically just making it so the trail doesn't look as long. That's kind of the idea. Now we have the shrink amount, which is basically going to make all of the duplicates just shrink a little bit over time until it turns to like 0 at the end, I believe. So yeah, you have this sort of like shrinking effect. And this works really well with things like this sphere because it's like very clean. You could like turn this up a little higher if you wanted. So there's like more multiples, and then it's like very clear, just like the shape of the trail and stuff like that. You add a tiny bit of noise, to break it up, change the scale a little, and it's like harder to tell that it's all like interpolated in a linear manner. And so this is, as I showed before, playing every frame, and it's not exactly real time, but it's pretty close to 24 frames per second, which is what I have this file set to. Okay, then we have speed threshold, which is going to make more sense when we look at something like the Mixamo flip right here. This is super broken. It's hilarious. Okay, it's because I wasn't on the first frame. That's why. But in a case where it looks just like crazy and out of whack like this, just move forward a few frames and it should start working better again. So let's just go back to the first frame though, change this to multiples like I had it before, and I'll just turn the speed threshold to 0. So right now it's duplicating every part of the mesh, but we'll see when it starts to flip right here. Okay, so like I showed before, the foot is going to be moving faster than everything else. So that's when the speed threshold comes in handy. You can say, I only want the parts that are moving faster than this amount to actually produce multiples. And so you can see it's starting to delete everything except for the parts that are moving fast. So we can have it so it's only like the tip of the foot. Now we also have where is it? Oh yeah, we also have the mask randomness right here, which is basically just adding a random texture. So it breaks it up in a way that isn't clean. You can see there's like some faces being deleted. If we turn this to 0, it will be much smoother. So you can kind of, decide whether you want that or not. It's just going to delete faces. We can turn it up a little higher. You can like kind of see what's going on. It just sort of breaks it up. It looks weird when it's paused, but in motion, it just makes it look a little fuzzier like that. If we set it to 0, you can, see what is going on. I think it's like an interesting effect. This also is going to make it more apparent what the distance does, the multiples distance. It's just making it so like the trails are not nearly as long, but it's the same amount of multiples and stuff like that. Okay, so what else do we have? We have expand vertex group. So this is the sort of thing that, like I showed before, if you have a vertex group set here, you can make it so that, let's see, I think on the collection, we have, turn this one off. I'll set the sword to be multiples. Okay, so we have parts of this animation where, let's see, when it starts swinging fast right here, I do have a vertex group making it so that only the blade is selected so that it's not trying to duplicate parts of the hilt, and expanding the vertex group just lets you sort of like, just push it up further. And if it's set to like, I think by default, it should be set to like 0.01, but if you have it set to 0, a lot of the time, for some reason, it starts including faces that are outside of the group. So I just added this as an option to sort of fine tune parts of it. Yeah, expand vertex group. So yeah, that's what we got. And then we have noise strength, which I already showed. It's like, the same idea. Seed is just going to add a different amount, I think, for the noise. So you can move that. And then we have this delete mask. So when this is checked, it will actually delete things based on the speed and the vertex group and, the mask randomness and stuff. But if you uncheck it, it won't delete any of them. And it's basically expecting you to, like if we hover over this, it should say, leave this unchecked if you want to use shaders for a mask instead of deleting. So I do already have this set up by default. If we go over to the shader editor, you can see we have some attributes in here, and all of this is in the documentation, like what attributes exist and how to set them up. I showed I have a few screenshots on the product page, but we have a few that you can use. So we have a mask, which is going to be for the, for the vertex group. So if we expand the vertex group, you should be able to see the mask moving. This is for deleting. So the way that I have this right now is you can basically just plug it into the alpha like that, and it should start deleting it. We can expand the vertex group more, and you can see that it's, instead of deleting faces, it's just making it transparent with a shader. If we go back into solid view, it's still there. It's just transparent now. And that should also work with like the mask randomness and stuff. It's just like, changing where the attributes are, and we can like see it in real time, what's happening. And then the factor, if we look at that, what it is doing is looking at the first one and the last one and making like a gradient through all of them. So this is the sort of thing, if we plug this in directly, it will basically make it get transparent over time. Now, if we multiply these two together, that's just a way of like kind of mixing the mask and the factor together. So you should have this, let's see, you should end up with a sort of gradient that goes from, well, first off, it's deleting the hilt, and then it is going to fade it out as it gets closer to like the end of the trail. So then you end up with just like a different, just a different look. And that's like completely optional whether you decide to use that or not. We also have that sort of option with smearing. So you can see, let's see, right here, when this is smearing, sorry, let's turn this to smear. You can see that the smearing part is black, and that's because there is a third attribute called smear. We have mask, factor, and smear. And this is basically just going to only show the parts of the mesh that are being manipulated by the smearing. Yeah. And then I ran it through this curve just to accentuate it a little more. And now, it should work a little better. I'm going to scale this up because it usually looks a little more obvious what's happening when I do that. And we can also turn the texture should be up pretty high. Let's get rid of that VMAP. So now when this rotates, you can see that, the smear is a different color. You could do the same thing where you plug this into the alpha and then it starts to get like more transparent as it goes through like that. It's like this ghost trail. I think that's pretty cool. I don't know. Let's see. Do I have anything else to talk about? Let's look at the directions. There are some directions in here. Yeah. So I talked about how to apply it. I told you about the shading tips. Now best practices, set the playback to every frame. I talked about that. Hide the smear frame modifier while animating, which I mentioned. Another thing is using a mesh with consistent amount of geometry. So what I mean by that is like, if you go into edit mode, you don't want the amount of faces to change over time. Otherwise, the smear doesn't like know what to do because it's expecting that the amount of faces will not change. So an instance of that is just like turning on and off the subdivision as it moves. So we can like see this. I'll just like turn it off, and now it like doesn't know what to do because it's like checking for the previous frame and it's like, oh, it has a different number of points. I don't know how to smear between the two. So yeah, you can set it back, just move it forward. Basically, if you do anything like this with subdivision, you can just like go back to the first frame and, make it move, make it go forward so that it can load and figure out what to do. And another thing is baking before rendering. So like you might be able to get away with rendering like a single frame, maybe not. Let's find out. If you render an animation, you should definitely bake it first. And that's like pretty easy. Basically, all you have to do is, you know what happened? It's because I don't have a camera in the scene. Anyway, when you like the smear, you like the way it looks, you can just come over to the physics tab again and turn on cache, and you can do bake or calculate to frame. I would choose bake, and I think it's going to bake depending on where you have the in and out part of the timeline set. So for instance, if you only wanted, I hope that doesn't crash. When you move around the playhead, sometimes it might crash. So I recommend, I guess, not doing that because it's like skipping frames is trying to calculate a lot. But anyway, when you have it looking the way you want, you can just press bake, turn on cache, press bake, and it's just going to bake the whole timeline. So if you wanted, for instance, to only bake like the first 80 frames, you would just change this to 80. And then when you bake, it'll bake 0 to 80, and then it stops. And now it should play a little faster, hopefully. And this also means that if you want to update it, you change settings in here and recalculate the whole simulation and stuff, you should press the delete button, this little trash can. I usually turn cache off just so it's not trying to save anything, because when you're caching, it's like saving data so that it doesn't have to calculate it later. But if you're changing a lot of settings, then you kind of want to see all of these edits change in real time instead of having like lingering data. But yeah, that's how you do that. I just want to show, I want to show the long smears again, and that is good to do with the Mixamo flip. So it can be good for like practical use, but this is also going to be really nice for if you want something a little more unrealistic that will like smear even when things are moving slowly. You can turn the length up like a lot higher and it should start smearing like this. You can see it takes a while for parts of the mesh to like catch back up, and I think it's really funny. This is also something I showed in not the object smear, but just I think it's the collection smear. Yeah, so I have this one. I can set this to extra long smears and we can take a look at it. Let's see. it's going to leave like pretty clean arcs like that. And it's going to take a while for the smear to catch back up with the body. So it's like a lot better for slow moving objects if you want it to, you know, work that way. Like I said, it's not very realistic, but I think it's like really fun. It's just kind of like a trippy effect. Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to show the extra long smears because that's the last thing I added. But I think I kind of covered everything. So we have the normal smear, we have the extra long smears. This is the multiples, but it's being used for like punching, and then I'm moving the noise up so that they move around to like different spots instead of being like this where they're all in line with each other, which I still think is a cool effect. It's a little more like in the Matrix when in like the dojo scene when you have like sort of multiple fists and stuff, but they're all sort of in line. When you turn the noise up, it's a little more like, you know, like in an anime or something where you have like a flurry of punches, or something like Street Fighter where you have like Chun-Li kicking a lot really fast. You could do that really easily. You could make it so there are like multiple legs in like a cartoony run cycle, things like that. Anyway, I hope you all have a lot of fun with this. It was definitely fun for me to make. And yeah, I just hope a lot of people get a lot of use out of it. I hope this cleared up some issues people are having with using it. And yeah, have a good one.